This morning, we're going to continue with our look at this question that we've been following for these 2 weeks, and that is the question of what is our place within the rest of creation? What is humankind's place? How are we to be present in creation? How do we relate to the rest of creation? And what are our responsibilities within creation? And we've been looking at some ways of answering that question, but when we approach this question theologically, we're always going back to look at certain sources to give us some guidance, some ethical wisdom for answering that question. One of the sources that we've been looking at is the Bible, both the Old Testament and the New Testament. We've looked at several texts there that address not problems that we may be facing with the environment, with how creation is doing today, but the scriptures offer us guidance on who we are, what's our relationship with God, how are we to relate to one another, and in that set of relationships also, how are we to relate to the rest of creation. Two examples of others' experiences that we've looked at are John Hooper at the Yak Farm, and then yesterday's visit to the organic dairy farm with the Sherping family. Can I ask you, what was your reaction to the dairy farm? Any comments or thoughts on that? It smelled really different, yes, from what you're used to. All right, and the rain and the mud didn't help either. Okay. Okay, very good. That surprised that the cows stay out outside the barn almost all the time, no matter what the weather conditions, including during the coldest part of the winter when it can get way down below zero. But as Rick Sherping explained, when you're doing it naturally, as they're doing it, the animals are able to develop an ability to handle that. What about his reasons? What about their reasons for switching to organic? Do you remember what they were? Mm-hmm. Mainly they switched because of concerns about health. And what over the years he came to discover that the use of some of the material ingredients or chemicals that they were using, especially for controlling weeds and pests and that, where he became convinced were just not real healthy for humans to be around. And so they wanted to go in this direction. Okay. All right, so what we're pointing to there is that in terms of the Sherping family, their experience was that we have to look for perhaps a better way to not just make a living, but to work with the creatures that God has put two other areas we want to look at in terms of finding where we can answer this question. One would be to look at theologians throughout our history. We'll start that today. And another would be to continue looking a little bit more at Catholic social teaching. We've already done something on that, but we'll be beginning to look more seriously at both the theologians and the Catholic social teaching today. And I just want to give you a reminder. Remember at the beginning of last week, I asked you to be thinking about what you think is the biggest environmental problem we face today. And that at the end of this week, I'll be asking you to do a final piece of writing on that question. What is the biggest environmental problem we face today? And secondly, what from all of these sources, what do you find that can help us to address that particular environmental problem that you've identified? But right now, I'd like us to look at the three examples of theologians that we could point to for some, or look to for some guidance on how we answer our question. These are only examples, but they're really very important examples. These are very, very big names. All right. One is St. Augustine. Right. You've heard of him, I'm sure. Sometimes people, it can be pronounced St. Augustine as well. But St. Augustine, a very, very big name in Catholic theology, lived not that long after the time of Christ. 354 to 430 years, I know is a long time. But in comparison to where we are now, over 2,000 years from that point, that we look at as being pretty close to the time of Christ. St. Augustine and each of these theologians, I just want to lift up a couple of things that they had to tell us about creation and about how we might think about our place within the rest of creation. St. Augustine wrote about the need for us to simply appreciate the beauty and the goodness that we find in nature. Just appreciate it. Don't have to change it necessarily. Don't have to figure it out, understand it. Just appreciate the beauty as we find it. Yesterday, some of you were having fun with the kittens, the baby chicks. There was a kind of a young calf there. Others were noting about, commenting on the roosters crowing, right? Those are examples of just simply appreciating things in nature as we come upon them, as we find them. And that's all you can do. What else can you do with a kitten other than just appreciate its loveliness and the beauty that is there? Can you think of other examples? Are there other things in nature that you particularly just simply enjoy? Flowers, they're everywhere, and they're beautiful, and there's such a variety of them. What else? Okay, let's go on. Again, St. Augustine mentioned that God created many things, not because of any usefulness that they offer, but simply for their beauty. That's all, and that's something we need to get used to. Because I think in our culture, in our society, we tend to want to know what's the use of this? What value does it have? Or to sometimes change the land into something that can produce money, make money for us. But sometimes it's better to recognize that just enjoy it as it is, all right? Another one, another theologian we can point to is St. Francis of Assisi. He lived much later. 1182 to 1226. What do you know about St. Francis? That's probably the most common response, and it's absolutely correct. He was an animal lover. But what we also need to remember about St. Francis is that he devoted his entire life to imitating Christ. One of the things we should notice about St. Francis is, in a sense, he represents a very Catholic attitude towards our question, caring for creation. Because for St. Francis, it was both concern for other humans, especially those who were poor, vulnerable, living on the margins in any way. His whole life was given to that. But he also represents caring for other creatures. Not just one or the other, but both of them. And that will, if you do any further study or reading of Catholic teaching on caring for creation, on our place within the rest of creation, one of the things that you'll notice that is very Catholic is that we do not do one or the other. So then the third one that I'd point to, again, just an example of a theologian we can turn to, but again, a very important one, a very big name. That's St. Thomas Aquinas, lived a little bit later, around that time of St. Francis, a little bit later, 1225 to 1274. If you're not familiar with him, his is one of the biggest names among Catholic theologians. St. Thomas Aquinas wrote many very large books on Catholic theology. And he's used in the School of Theology here, in seminaries, as a major source. But St. Thomas, wrote about everything theologically. But he also, within that, he had some things to say about our question. What is our place within the rest of creation? And among those things, he stressed that all of creation reflects God's goodness. All of it does. Even things that we think may not be so attractive and so lovely and so approachable. But he said, in one way or another, for one reason or another, that scene or that creature was created and put here by God, and therefore is another reflection of God's goodness. In fact, St. Thomas asked the question, why do we have such a variety of creatures? Why do we have bugs and beetles and mosquitoes and crocodiles and hyenas? Things that when you think about it, look at it, you wonder what is the purpose of them? Some of them just seem to have no purpose at all. St. Thomas's answer to that was that, well, why do you think it would be? Let me first ask you, why do you think we have beetles, hyenas, creatures that we don't seem to particularly care for, even something like here in Minnesota, mosquitoes? Why do we have those? Why would you say God allowed them to be part of our creation, part of our scene? Why? Or spiders, or snakes. Think of things that you maybe don't like. Any thoughts? Want to take a shot at it? Yeah. Okay. So different people will appreciate different things. People have different levels of appreciation also for different things, and that may be one way of reaching the whole variety of people as well. Any other thoughts on that? All right, that's an important thing we could say a little bit more on. We use the word ecology. Ecology. That, among other things, is pointing to the balance that we have within creation, that everything is there to provide some kind of a balance, has a purpose, and we know that if we start pulling things out or causing some things to become extinct, that might threaten other parts of it. Okay? We know that today because we have better science than St. Thomas Aquinas did back then. We know that we can't wipe out the rainforest because we're going to lose a lot of things, not just the rainforest, but the animals that live there, possibly some discoveries for humans, medicines, etc. All right? We know that today, and we know a lot of other things that St. Thomas didn't know. So, but St. Thomas had another answer for why God created some, what sometimes appear to be really strange creatures, nuisances, things we don't seem to need or want. And his reason is that no one creature could adequately reflect or represent the goodness of God. Now, what does that tell you about that mosquito that you're about to whack? If every creature is needed to reflect God's goodness, what does that say then about how we are to respond to creatures, especially some that are trying to do us harm?
We're all created to coexist, and that we shouldn't do that because other creatures can use them.
Okay. That may be hard to put into practice, of course, with that mosquito was buzzing around your ear and that. But it does, and partly I'm just having fun with this, but partly it does suggest something if we keep the bigger picture in front of us and remember that all creatures do have a purpose, even if we don't understand what that purpose is. Though, as I said, we're understanding more and more of it in terms of how things are balanced and dependent upon one another. Okay? All right, so one last question I have for you on this, and that is, if of these three, which one would you say, do you think, is the patron saint of environmentalists, patron saint of those who promote ecology, technically? Why would you say Francis? Just seems it's got to be Francis. Okay, yep. Because he cared for both humans and all the other creatures. That's right. Yeah, and it is Francis. You're absolutely right. All right. Pope John Paul II declared him to be the patron saint of those who promote ecology, who especially care for the environment. Pope John Paul II declared him to be that in 1979. All right, so it is St. Francis, yes. Okay, here's something I'd like you to do now. Take this green sheet and just read it to yourself, and then do some writing on which of these are the three theologians, which of these three writings offers something that you think is helpful to us in understanding our question.